up on lawmakers. Governor Perdue announces more caseworkers for the Department of Family and Children's Services. We'll have complete coverage of today's Eggs and Issues breakfast. And we'll have the latest on proponents of a bill to limit public smoking. Those stories and more are next.
Live from Atlanta, this is Lawmakers for Tuesday, January 11th. Here are your hosts, Nwandi Lawson and Gerald Bryant.
And good evening, everyone. Welcome to Lawmakers. Also on tonight's broadcast, we'll talk with Senate Majority Leader Bill Stevens and new House Majority Leader Jared King.
Plus, we'll have a report on plans to deal with Georgia's overcrowded prisons, but our top story tonight, the Eggs and Issues breakfast. The Georgia Chamber of Commerce held their annual Eggs and Issues breakfast this morning at the Georgia World Congress Center, an event where the governor and other leaders of the Georgia legislature discussed key issues and share ideas to make Georgia a better place to work and live. David Zelski attended this morning's breakfast and joined us live with the details. David.
Well, thanks, Nwandi. The eggs remain the same this year, scrambled, but with Republicans in charge of the governor's office, the Senate, and now the House, many of the issues have changed. Governor Perdue started off the morning speeches with his outlook for New Georgia.
Every one of you is a salesperson for Georgia. We've got a great product to sell, and hopefully I know that you're sold on Georgia, and I hope you'll help us to continue to sell Georgia in the future.
We're going to face some issues that haven't been tackled before. Yes, we're going to take on ethics reform, and we're going to get a bill on the floor, and we're going to pass an ethics reform bill in the House in 2005. We're going to look at civil justice reform.
We believe in lower taxes, limited government, and the power of the free enterprise system.
Governor Perdue also announced a major change in the Department of Family and Children's Services to aid caseworkers.
We know that the caseloads have been greater than we want, so we're going to dedicate over $5 million for 500 new DFCS caseworkers throughout the state to make sure that our kids are cared for.
Our DFCS workers are overworked and underpaid, and the children of Georgia have suffered because of that. So I'm very excited about that proposal. Now, we'll have more on the DFCS proposal later in the program. As for Lieutenant Governor Taylor, the lone Democrat speaking at the breakfast, his focus was on education, primarily lowering class sizes. Reporting live, I'm David Zelski for Lawmakers.
Thank you, David. Lieutenant Governor Taylor, though happy with Governor Perdue's proposal to increase the number of DFCS caseworkers, has not been satisfied with some of the ways the governor is handling education. He stated this morning that it may take a vote from the people of Georgia to lower class sizes.
This session, I'll again be talking about a constitutional amendment that gives people a vote on reducing class sizes in kindergarten through third grade. Since politicians and bureaucrats don't seem to have the will to do what is needed, I think the people of Georgia should decide if reducing class sizes in grades K through 3 should be a priority. I know that their answer will be yes.
And we continue our look at pre-filed bills that will likely be hot topics this session with a look at a proposed statewide smoking ban inside restaurants and bars. For the second session in as many years, Senator Don Thomas, who is a physician, offered legislation that would do just that. Our Jesse Freeman spoke with him and has the story. Jesse.
And one, Senator Don Thomas says the good health of Georgians is the reason why a smoking ban inside restaurants and bars is necessary. He says that making the ban statewide would put all of these places on a level playing field, and so for the second straight year, he has offered anti-smoking legislation.
Just about all experts agree secondhand smoke is dangerous. Senator Don Thomas says the evidence is overwhelming enough to necessitate a statewide ban in bars and restaurants.
It will eliminate smoking in restaurants, public buildings, workplace, and it's really good for the state of Georgia.
But not all lawmakers agree.
While it may be in sight a good idea for the non-smokers, it's a bad idea for the businesses, non-interference of private ownership rights.
Many bar patrons agree the ban would have health benefits, but are reluctant to agree to a total ban.
I feel that we should make a reasonable decision and at least allow a designated area in all bars and restaurants for people that do smoke and want to smoke.
Most of the person who drink, they're smokers, you know what I mean? And you know how smoking is. As soon as you start drinking, they don't want to smoke. Senator Thomas points out there is room for compromise on the bill.
We're not interfering with anything at the airport, tobacco shops, or exempted, and that's pretty much it. Bars is up for discussion. We have people that frequent bars that want us to make them non-smoking also. So we're open to some discussion on that part of the bill.
Now, the similar bill that Senator Thomas authored last year did not come out of the House Governmental Affairs Committee. That was chaired by Representative Powell. We'll keep you updated on the bill's progress this year. Reporting live, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
Now, Jesse, this time around, is there support for this bill from both parties?
Well, yes, and Nwandi. In fact, Senator Christine Reed is the co-sponsor of the bill.
All right, Jesse, thank you.
Well, Governor Perdue's State of the State address is just over 24 hours away. Today I talked with Senator Majority Leader Bill Stevens, and he expects the governor to talk about education, child protection, and money.
I think the budget is now in better shape than it has been in the last couple of years. He'll be talking about the priorities in that budget that he thinks are the best for 8.9 million Georgians. So, in general, I think he'll be revisiting some of the things that he talked about before, but adding to those with more specifics now that times have improved economically in Georgia.
The governor's ethics package has already been introduced over in the House, and I understand the education package, so there'll be some action on that soon?
Well, tomorrow in the Senate, the governor's education package will be introduced, and it will address things like flexibility for local school systems and a virtual high school that can be accessed by any Georgian and some other innovative things that he'll be talking about in the State of the State, I would bet.
And I am assuming with the majority in both houses now that both education and ethics will have pretty clear sailing.
I think that there will be discussion, but I think at the end of the day, at the end of this session, which I hope is sooner rather than later, that the governor's package will pass, and I think Georgians will be proud of that. I think the days of gridlock are over.
Coming up later in our broadcast, we're talking with Senator Robert Brown, who is the minority leader in the state Senate, and he said he had some concerns of what might happen now that Republicans do control both the House and the Senate, and he said he was fearful of what might happen to the Hope Scholarship, that Republicans might do some damage or even consider doing away with the Hope Scholarship. Any basis for that fear?
Well, no, and let me alleviate his fear and the fear, any fear of anybody in Georgia. The Hope Scholarship program is here. It's going to stay. It'll be here for my children and for your viewers' children and grandchildren, and we'll do everything in the world we can to protect it. It's not going anywhere, and it's an invaluable part of education in Georgia, and it's part of the reason why we're ahead of many other states in higher education. So it's not going anywhere.
Back on another educational issue, at the Eggs and Issues breakfast this morning, Lieutenant Governor Mark Taylor indicated that he would like to see a vote by the public on a constitutional amendment on class size in Georgia. And questioned about that by reporters later, he said he didn't think that would cost any money. Your take on an actual vote by the public on class size?
Well, I don't think there's any question that if we had all the money in the world, we'd want to have a teacher-pupil ratio of 1-to-1. If we could afford to do that, that would be the ideal. The reality is we have to do prioritization of the resources that we have. And the governor's education package is going to address flexibility for local school systems so that those that can use the monies in a way that's more flexible than the one-size-fits-all policy of the past. I think we need to examine everything to do with education, starting with that subject and many others.
Final question as we go into the first few days of this session. What are some of the other priorities of the governor and of Senate Republicans that we are likely to see come up early?
Well, I think you're going to see a broad discussion of a lot of issues that hopefully mean something to average everyday Georgians in their lives, starting with education and transportation and fiscal restraint and kids and jobs and those things that really affect their everyday lives.
Meanwhile, House leaders are expressing enthusiasm for the governor's initiatives for children and youth. Earlier, I talked to House Majority Leader Gerald Bryant about funding for education and additional child welfare workers.
I think what he outlined this morning at the chamber breakfast continues to expand educational opportunities for all of our students. I think the point that I think he made that really stood out is that he really wants an educated Georgia. And with the priority in terms of our pay raises for our teachers and for the flexibility, we stressed accountability a lot in the past few years for our classroom teachers and administrators, but we need to give them the flexibility locally to achieve those results, and I think that's a great stride and great stride forward.
So you mentioned an educated Georgia. I know in speaking with some of the Democratic leaders, they're very concerned about the future of hope. I know a lot of work was done in the last session. Any look to what might occur in terms of hope for this year?
Well, as you know, last session we addressed hope to save hope. It was to save hope for those students that needed it and make sure it was there in the future. It's been extremely successful. And we're committed, as is the governor and the Senate, to making sure that hope is there for those that need it. I don't know of anything on the table right now regarding hope that's going to come up, but I can assure you this, that the leadership of both the House and the Senate are committed that hope will be there in the future for every deserving student.
Well, while we're talking about the children and youth of the state, of course, the governor also spoke about some changes for Division of Children and Family Services, DFCS workers, increases. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, the additional of these new caseworkers is critical. Unfortunately, the demand for caseworkers in that area of service to our state continues to increase. And they're not going to be able to intervene at the times necessary to place these children and be involved in the cases that we need without additional caseworkers in the field. And the governor's budget commitment to increase that department substantially is welcomed by the leadership in the House, and I think we'll find no opposition in our budget committee at all.
Well, of course, we are looking forward to the State of the State message tomorrow and finding out a little bit more about some of those budget priorities. But I'm wondering if you can give us just a little bit of a preview of what we might expect there.
Well, we know that the economy continues to improve. I think our biggest challenge is continuing to look at the education funding and the healthcare funding. Healthcare in particular is growing at a pace faster than any other revenue stream. And so while we're encouraged by the good revenue numbers that have come out in the past few months, and we know that we're headed in the right direction, and a lot of the cuts that we've had to do in the past, we're probably not going to have to look at this time around. We still have challenges to meet that healthcare area. And I believe this General Assembly, this session, we're going to have to begin the process to get a handle on healthcare spending so that we maintain good budget integrity in the future.
Thank you so very much, Representative Jerry King, our House Majority Leader. We appreciate you being with us on Lawmakers.
In other news, the Department of Corrections says Georgia's prison population has reached its maximum capacity. Over 50,000 inmates are currently incarcerated in the state's prisons. Lawmakers Chris Knight joins us live from the Capitol with more on that story. Chris.
That's right, Gerald. The prison population has grown by nearly 7,000 inmates in 10 years. The increasing number of inmates is creating challenges the Department of Corrections and the Department of Pardons and Parole must now face. Georgia's prison population has reached its maximum capacity.
We've had some pretty significant growth over the last 10 years. We doubled the population, in fact. We have 54,000 men and women incarcerated. That's the fifth largest prison population in the nation.
While the prison population has increased, the Department of Corrections budget has not quite kept up with the growth.
But our budget this year, the proposed budget going in, was $882 million, which was the same budget we had in 2001 when we had 7,000 less inmates.
But the Department of Corrections is creating programs that help control the growing number of inmates, including day reporting centers for nonviolent offenders, including those with drug addiction problems.
And what this program does is requires them to report daily to a day reporting center. Just like they're in prison, we give them a formal drug therapy program that treats the problem versus the symptom of the problem. Very much.
And the Department of Pardons and Parole recognizes the benefits of successfully transitioning inmates from incarceration to the community as well.
Well, the average incarceration figure today is about $48 a day versus a little over $3 a day for inmates that are on parole. The cases that you see in my office today, this is one day's work, and this is about the number that you'll see in here every day that I'll make decisions on before the end of the day.
The Department of Pardons and Parole says that while the number of inmates released on parole has increased, public safety remains the department's top priority. Reporting live on 6 Nights for Lawmakers.
Chris, we saw that pile of file folders in his office there. How many cases does the Department of Pardons and Parole review each month?
Well, Gerald, Chairman Betty Nick says that the 5-member board reviews anywhere between 1,300 to 1,800 cases.
Okay, Chris, thank you very much for the report.
And we now turn back to the Department of Family and Children's Services and Governor Perdue's proposal to raise the number of caseworkers in Georgia. David Zelski recently spent the day with a caseworker in Hall County and a family who's benefited from their caseworkers' involvement in their lives.
She's done everything that I've asked her to.
Meet Lisa Walden, a caseworker for the Hall County Department of Family and Children's Services for over 2 years now.
Somebody calls us, that matter who. We take the report. If it meets the criteria of child abuse and neglect, it gets assigned to an investigator.
Traveling door to door, family to family, many who fear she has come to take their children away.
We do everything we can to keep a kid out of foster care. Like, that's never the number one thing to do. We sleep around and we do talk.
Spencer Smith and Tina White have 2 children under 5. All-County DFCS is watching over the family for prior actions of neglect. But since Lisa entered their life, both sides have worked hard to change this family's direction.
They moved to Hall County. Immediately, I became their case manager, put a counselor into their home so that the counselor could come to them. I put a parenting class person from mental health into their home so that she could come to them, so that they have transportation problems. They don't have a vehicle.
We kind of didn't know nothing about it. I really didn't want to cooperate with them and didn't want them to really come into my house and come into my life like that. But since they come into it, I see things better for us.
They've worked so hard. They call me. They let me know anytime anything changes, anytime they need something, anytime if something were to happen to the kids, or if the kids were acting up, they call me. They let me know absolutely everything that's going on in their life, and that makes me better able to help them. Me and my kids and my husband have a kind of better relationship than we did a couple of years ago. Yeah, my mom has a better relationship than we did a couple of years ago. I have a better look on life than I did a couple of years ago. It's helped me a lot.
This is just one of thousands of DFCS cases pending, and most situations don't come with this level of cooperation.
Most of my cases are drug cases, yes. Most of them are meth cases. You'll end up with people that run from you, no matter how hard you try with them. We have a hard time ensuring safety that way if we can't even see the kids. We end up having to go to court on a lot of those. And I think that gives us a bad name, the fact that we go to court on a lot of cases and the judge will give us custody of kids. It's not anything that we intentionally set out to do. That's the last resort to take custody. But it does happen.
Newly appointed Department of Human Resources Commissioner B.J. Walker has already made some changes, and Lisa says some of those are already making a difference in Hall County.
She's doing the new assessments and expedited investigation, which allows us to assess a situation that may not be abuse or neglect. It may just be a family is having financial problems or something, and we're able to provide them with the tools that they need to rectify their problem without having to criminalize them. The assessments just sets all that up, and then they don't have a case that somebody's got to monitor for 6 months.
Lisa currently handles 23 cases. That's an all-time low for her, but still close to double federal caseload recommendations. Now she and nearly every other caseworker in the state are turning to the Georgia legislature for a change. Governor Perdue's $5 million proposal this morning for 500 new caseworkers may be the way to lower caseloads all around the state, improving efficiency. Step 2 would be finding these 500 qualified DFCS caseworkers who are willing to work at the current salary, which, like Georgia teachers, has been a topic of concern for DFCS. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm David Zelski.
Thank you, David. Excellent report on a significant problem. A reminder for those of you with access to the internet, you can watch Lawmakers online. Visit our website at gtb.org for more information. Click on Watch Online, then follow the instructions for watching live, or looking at past Lawmakers programs in our archives. That website address again is gtb.org. Just another way we keep you apprised of what's going on at the Georgia General Assembly.
We'd like to recommend another website that's a valuable resource for information about the Georgia General Assembly. Go to www.legis.state.ga.us. That website is also another great research tool that we at Lawmakers use on a regular basis. And now more from the annual Eggs and Issues breakfast, where much of the emphasis was on how the Republican-led government wants to lead Georgia.
We're going to apply 4 basic principles when we look at legislation. We're going to ask these questions. Will it reduce the size of government? Will it increase personal responsibility? Will it support and strengthen our traditional family structure? And will it reduce the tax burden on our citizens? And unless legislation meets one of those tests, it's going to have a tough course in the Georgia House. Ronald Reagan talked about a shining city on the hill. President George H.W. Bush had 1,000 points of light. President George W. Bush talked about compassionate conservatism. Governor Sonny Perdue likes to call our ongoing revolution a new Georgia. I would submit that this references a coherent, principled philosophy that serves as a bridge from the era of big government to solve social problems to a new era in which we have a healthy trust in the people of this state to govern themselves. 3 years ago, we were 100% Democrat. Then we became 50% Republican and Democrat, and now we're down to 25 Democrats, 75 Republicans. I don't know if it's the issues or the edge, but something is not agreeing with Georgia Democrats. Governor, Mr. Speaker, Lieutenant Governor, I don't know if I should tell you this, but it's not the edge.
Well, after the breakfast, Governor Perdue and Lieutenant Governor Mark Taylor commented on another issue concerning DFCS caseworkers, that's their salaries. It's an issue that Taylor says needs to be addressed for both caseworkers and teachers.
I'm not excited at all about what we're doing with pay raises in state government. It's been a very, very difficult 3 years now for state employees. Their health insurance is up almost 20% a year, and their pay has barely been increased. So whether it's teachers or DFCS workers, they have the hardest job in our state, and they need to be paid better.
I think it's not so much the pay initially. They obviously will be available to the 2% pay raise that we'll have for our state employees, but I don't believe it's that much. We will see if we authorize this amount of positions and we aren't able to fill them with qualified people, then that'll be an indication that we need to look at salary.
Teachers' salaries will increase by 2% this September, and 75% of teachers will receive an additional 3% step increase this year. DFCS workers and all other state employees will receive the 2% raise in January 2006.
Meanwhile, Senate President Pro Tem Eric Johnson says just because state revenue collections continue to rise, that doesn't mean any additional money has to be spent. Here's more from the Savannah Republican.
After cutting $1.7 billion in the last 2 years, there may be some places that we need to store up. But we don't want to go back into the old days of just spending money because it's there. The first thing Georgia needs to do is rebuild its revenue, its reserve accounts, basically the taxpayer savings accounts. We've gone from $700 million to about $50 million, which will run the state for 30 minutes. So I think the first thing we do with excess revenue is rebuild our reserve accounts and not spend it unless it's absolutely necessary.
I also talked with Senate Minority Leader Robert Brown. I asked him what legislation he thought Republicans would be able to pass now that they control the Senate and the House.
There are a number of things that I will have a lot of concern about. The Hope Scholarship, as you know, Republicans historically have opposed the lottery, and I'm expecting they may want to repeal that and do away with the Hope Scholarship. There are other issues like that I have a lot of concern about. I'm real concerned that they are continuing to slow down the process of reducing class sizes. I think that's one of the most important things for the children of Georgia, as far as education and public schools are concerned, is to have reduced class sizes. As you know, the Republicans are fast moving toward slowing that process down, and I think that's going to ultimately hurt our efforts to improve the quality of education in Georgia.
Every 2 years, freshmen and veteran legislators spend 3 days in Athens, Georgia, preparing for the upcoming session. The event is known as the Biennial, and it's organized by the Carl Vinson Institute of Government at the University of Georgia, which shares its extensive research on some of the key issues facing the state of Georgia. David Zelski attended this year's Biennial, which took place in December.
It's not an easy process to learn, and it's built that way. One way for the 44 new House members and 21 new senators to learn the ropes of the Georgia General Assembly is through the Biennial.
This is the 48th year, or the 24th Biennial Institute that we've had, which is probably the longest in the country.
You need to come with the confidence that each of you have been duly elected from your respective districts, and you come with the sacred trust to represent the voices of all of those people.
Several veteran legislators, legislative staff, and members of the Vinson Institute come together during these 3 days to team teach sessions to the new legislators.
Well, it's been fantastic, mainly meeting the people I'll be working with on a day-to-day basis and getting to know them so that they're not strangers when we get to Atlanta.
Not only does everyone get to know one another, but we give an orientation to the freshman members in the process. And the veteran members are learning more about topics like transportation and medicine and medical care, and it's very important to be done.
We've had tremendous shifts in political power with the Republicans now in the House leadership, so this is an opportunity for me as a Democrat to get to know who the new players are in the Republican leadership.
To get with experts on different policy issues, to learn the different procedural aspects of the rules of the House and the General Assembly, and just to get an overall working knowledge now before they go in on the second Monday in January and hit the ground running.
Transportation, health care, corrections, and education were all key topics of this year's biennial, issues that lawmakers, new and old, will become very familiar with over the next 40 legislative days. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm David Zelski.
Well, it was wild in the Capitol today as wildlife from all over Georgia came to the Capitol for Georgia Sportsman's Day. Lawmakers Angelina Washington has more.
It's a zoo in there. Well, not really. It's Sportsman's Day at the Capitol, and creatures were all over.
This is a peregrine falcon. It's species that is endangered in the state of Georgia.
This is an albino corncrake. This is a barred owl.
We've got all the hunting and fishing and conservation organizations together from around the state. And basically, we feel that hunting and fishing have a great story to tell, and we need our legislators and share those great stories.
The governor and Senator Preston Smith accepted awards from the Georgia Legislative Sportsman Caucus for Senate Bill 541, which allows hunters and fishermen to register to vote when they renew their hunting and fishing licenses.
I'm honored to stand here with these folks at my back who are true believers in the cause, understanding everything that hunting and fishing brings to our state.
1 out of 7 Georgians hunt or fish, so Georgia's wildlife is extremely important. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Angelina Lawson.
Wow, Angelina, really going out there on that story. Well, coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, we'll have a preview of the governor's legislative priorities for 2005. Be sure to join Georgia Public Broadcasting for Governor Sonny Perdue's State of the State address. That's live at 8 p.m. Simulcast on television and radio and streamed live on the GPB website. Our State of the State broadcast will repeat on Thursday, January 13th at 5 a.m. If you miss any part of this broadcast, tune in when Lawmakers rebroadcast tomorrow morning at 5:30 a.m. on GPB. Now, stay tuned for Crater Lake, Mirror of Heaven. That's coming up next right here on GPB.
Angelina's braver than I am.
She's way braver than I am.
That's our broadcast for this, the second legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly. Thanks for joining us. I'm Gerald Bryant.
And I'm Nwandi Lawson for all of us here at Lawmakers. Good night.
Production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.